Mother Nature has managed to produce some pretty creepy specimens, and more bizarre creatures are being discovered all the time. Indeed, gross reflexes or sinister traits have evolved all over the place in the animal kingdom, freaking people out in the process. We're constantly being amazed by the strange critters found on land or in the sea, and put together the list of the 5 creepiest things found in nature. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. Coconut crabs. Despite its relatively charming name, the coconut crab is anything but. The other names it goes by, the robber crab or palm thief, are a little more apt descriptions of this fearsome looking creature. It spends its time on land, being a terrestrial variety of crab. They can weigh up to 10 pounds and grow to a span of over 3 feet from one end to the other. These monstrosities are found anywhere the coconut palm grows, although it tends to get pushed out by human encroachment on their habitats. It inhabits its very own genus, being the only species included, which really sets it apart from other crabs, on top of it being absolutely massive. They're scavengers, feeding on mostly fruits and berries, but will also feed on other animals if it comes across something that's already dead. They'll basically pick up anything they come across, just in case it happens to be food. Their nickname of robber comes from this habit, with people observing that they will routinely take anything that's left lying around or otherwise unattended. When they're young, they use shells that they find lying around, slowly finding bigger ones to fit. When they reach adulthood, they end up growing a hard exoskeleton, negating the need for shells, which they then leave behind. They also have a type of lung which makes it impossible for them to breathe underwater for any length of time, although they do lay their eggs on the shore close to the edge of the sea. They then head back to the safety of land once again, with larvae spending about a month feeding on plankton before finding a shell and joining the adults. Once they pass their larval stage, they also can't swim, so they don't end up in the water that much. They're just not well suited to it at all. It's also worth noting that they can live up to 60 years by all reasonable estimates, making them incredibly long-living. They reach sexual maturity after 5 years. They also mate pretty frequently and do so many times throughout the year. Their size labels them as the largest terrestrial invertebrate in the entire world, meaning that they should be more prolific, but they're susceptible to being overrun by humans as civilization expands. Their only predators are other coconut crabs and people, meaning we're very much behind their lesson numbers in many places, with many people considering them to be poisonous, hunting them intensely. They locate their food by using their sense of smell, which is surprisingly keen and well developed. All of these peculiarities and their grotesque appearance add up to them being seriously creepy specimens. Number 4. Blanket octopus. The blanket octopus is undoubtedly one of the creepiest things found in the ocean, and that's saying a whole lot because the ocean is a seriously creepy place. It's filled with life that we'd consider to be completely alien in comparison to anything on land, and this freaky octopus really takes the cake. There are 4 distinct varieties of these, with their habitats ranging from surface waters to mid-ocean levels in warmer waters throughout the world. They all have some very peculiar habits and physiology, with a number of surprising tricks up their sleeves. The first one is that when they mate, they do so in a very peculiar way. We found it hard to believe when we first heard, but it seems that the male octopus will fill an arm up with sperm before actually tearing it off his own body. He then presents this severed arm to the female and sticks it to her. She then carries this arm around with her to help aid fertilization. That's not just creepy, it's downright disgusting. It's also pretty self-sacrificial on the part of the males, and it would be interesting to know if the act of ripping their arms out actually hurts them or if they're just too tough to show any weakness. They do end up usually dying after they do this, which means that it's one hell of a sacrifice for babies they'll probably never see. It's also worth mentioning here that the males are pretty tiny. They usually measure around the size of your thumb, with the females growing up to 10,000 times that size, sometimes exceeding 7 feet in length. Another wild trait is based on the fact that they're completely immune to Portuguese man-o'-war jellyfish, which have incredibly painful stingers along tentacles that can extend quite far and eventually become very dense. The female blanket octopus usually rips these tentacles out of the jellyfish, and they hold onto them with their suckers, giving them little or not so little whips that pack quite a punch. The first scientist who discovered this trait definitely ended up stinging himself pretty badly, paving the way for researchers to be much more gentle with these creepy ocean dwellers from then on. Their blankets can also sometimes break off, making for quite a strange sight when they do. These are sometimes seen by divers, and some say that they look beautiful, but we just see gross floating membranes. Number 3. Fulmar Chicks. These birds are pretty freaky. They're basically sitting ducks most of the time, with their young not being able to do much to physically throw down or scurry to safety if predators threaten them. So they've evolved a very strange trick to scare off any potential attackers and also ensure that they'll never make the same mistake twice. When they feel threatened, usually by a larger bird that's coming too close and making them uncomfortable, they don't yell "stranger danger" and blow a whistle. They also don't try to get away, and instead confront their attacker by opening their mouth up wide. They do this because they're able to launch a sickly yellow stream of fluid, laden with all sorts of oils and nasty stomach fluids. In short, they puke all over them in a splendid display of projectile vomiting. The oils that build up in their stomachs are specially suited to then coat the birds that are making them feel threatened, matting their feathers together and basically becoming a sticky, oily, stinky mess. This makes the larger birds unable to fly, as well as freaking them out and making them take off in shock. If the Fulmar Chicks manage to coat these birds with enough stomach oil, then they'll even lose buoyancy and drown. This will happen when they try to clean off all the oils by taking a dip after realizing they need to freshen up. They hop in, thinking about swimming around and cleaning themselves, but find instead that they're unable to stay afloat, slowly sinking beneath the surface and unable to help themselves. This is a pretty rough thing to have happen, and we're sure that some of the victims of the Fulmar Chicks weren't even trying to be threatening and simply passing by. We'd never want to be around them for any amount of time, because the idea of being coated in their stomach contents mixed with a special solution of oil just doesn't sound appealing in the least. Even though they might cause some issues when startled, leading to undeserving victims, this defense mechanism is absolutely wild and really caught our attention. We know about animals puking when threatened, but they usually only do so as a distraction or gut reaction, with the Fulmar Chicks adding a whole new element to the equation. Their approach is definitely effective, and we'd be surprised that a relatively innocuous bird was able to eventually acquire such an extraordinary trait. Number 2. Flatworm mating rituals. Flatworms are hermaphroditic creatures and are able to adapt to carry out either role as needed. This isn't unknown in the animal kingdom and is seen all over the place. What makes these creepy worms so amazing is how they decide what sex they're gonna be when it finally comes time to mate. They basically all have male appendages and are also double-headed and use these to have bouts with each other, with the victor staying in a male role. They sit up a little bit and point their penises at each other, basically engaging in a fencing duel. They thrust, parry, and strike in a high-stakes battle that's pretty strange, to say the least. It's not every day that animals go out of their way to cross swords in this fashion, literally using their organs, if you will, as swords, while trying to stab each other with them. These fights can last hours at times, with both opponents usually being jabbed more than once by the member of their enemy. We're totally fine with not adopting this practice among humans, as it would definitely lead to some awkward engagements, and we're happier avoiding that sort of conflict. The fight eventually ends when one of the flatworms eventually injects their sperm successfully into the other one. The winner then happily swims off to nurse their wounds and become a dad one day, while the other ends up converting over and adopting the female role of fertilizing and carrying their offspring. It's probably good that this all-out show of male dominance doesn't happen in nature more often, although it is an interesting trait. It still doesn't make the whole thing any less creepy, at least from our point of view, with the entire thing putting us off entirely. We don't share much in common with hermaphroditic species, so it goes without saying that their way of doing things would be strange to us, but we have to look at things from their point of view, and we'll admit that these flatworms really don't have much of a say in the matter. Number 1. Tongue-eating lice. The images of this louse dangling out of the open mouths of fish will haunt us for years to come. Not only is it one of the strangest kinds of parasites, but the actions it takes before eventually finding a place to call home is just revolting. They start by finding a suitable host and burrow their way into their victim through the gills. The females hook themselves up in front of the males after they settle in, with the female attaching herself to the fish's tongue and the male setting up shop on the gill arches behind her. They're only around 1 inch long in total, making it easy for them to sneak around inside their host's body before finding their perch. The female then eats through the fish's tongue, eventually making it fall off before taking its place and acting like the fish's tongue for the remainder of its life. The tongue basically atrophies after the parasite does its thing and leaves a perfect stub for the fish to then latch itself securely in place. It seems that the parasites then do no more actual damage, happy to just sit there and pick up food, although some studies have shown that being without an actual tongue does cause the host fish to end up underweight compared to its counterparts who remain parasite-free. These things are found all over the world, although they're not a big enough issue to start panicking about just yet. They really don't mess with people, although they can bite if handled with bare hands. We did, however, feel that we should mention a lawsuit that was filed in Puerto Rico that found snappers in a supermarket chain were infected with tongue-eating lice, potentially causing one customer to become ill after accidentally cooking one up. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you did, make sure you click that subscribe button before you head out if you're new. That's all you have to do. Come on, just click it. I know you want to. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. I heard it gives you superpowers in the future or something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.